The Institute for Security Studies hosted a seminar on lessons from the Ukraine war and African government's role in resolving this conflict. South African and Ukrainian experts focused on regional security, nuclear safety, as well as a forcible deportation of children. For more on this discussion, I'm joined by co-founder of the NPO Ukrainian Association of South Africa, that's Dzvinka Kachur, as well as Dr Elvis Fokala from the Center for Human Rights in the Faculty of Law, this at the University of Pretoria. A pleasure to have you both on the program this afternoon. Dzvinka, I'll start with you. As a co-founder of the Ukrainian Association of South Africa, you've been deeply involved in addressing the issue of unlawful deportation and also the transfer of Ukrainian children to Russian territory. Can you provide insights into some of the challenges that parents and caregivers face in repatriating these children, and also the impact of these altered personal data of ID and reunification?
Thanks a lot for having me, Hamza, and Dr. Fokala today. I think I would like to say that indeed there was this workshop, and there are more than 20 experts that are working together from Ukraine and South Africa, and they were working together for almost 3 months now on 3 different topics. So this is regional security, nuclear safety, and also, as you've correctly pointed out, forceful deportation of Ukrainian children. Currently, there are more than 19,500 of identified cases where Ukrainian children were deported to Russia, and during this process, their name, surnames, and date of birth can be modified. They also enforced with Russian citizenship without consent, and all this process make it very, very difficult for parents or caregivers or their communities to identify those children. Obviously, we are talking about 19,500 of identified children, but Russian authorities are claiming they have 700,000 Ukrainian children, and all those children are forcefully undergoing the process of changing their identity from Ukrainian identity to Russian identity.
Dr. Elvis, give us the perspective from the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. So you've been part of initiatives to really study and explore avenues for preventing this unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children. What are some of the key legal and human rights considerations in this very complex issue, particularly concerning the repatriation of these children to their homes?
Thank you for having us on the show. The first thing that I want to underline is that we are not interested in the political, the game that plays out in that space. And of course, as you've highlighted, our interest that brought us into this conversation was the alarming number of children that have been forcefully removed from Ukraine into Russia. And from the reports that we get is that these children have been brainwashed and also now been turned into or made to hate Ukraine and to become Russians. It is very important to underline that from a position of law, and the fact that as a child rights community, these are things that we speak strongly against, and against the fact that a war, children do not commit or cause wars in most situations. And the African, mechanisms, they do have a strong history on the fact that they have, in most cases, condemned crises of this nature. One clear example is what happened in Nigeria, in north part of Nigeria, where children were forcefully removed from the Kaduna region. And the African platform on children armed conflicts actually issued a very strong statement on the 9th of March, condemning that practice. It is in the same direction in the practice or whatever is happening, from the children being removed from Ukraine into Russia. From a right-based perspective, it is not right. It is a very strong violation of the rights of children. It is the forceful removal itself also could lead to, deprivation of liberty that these children, of course, have as a point of right. These two nations, Ukraine and Russia, that is, are state parties to the United Nations Convention. And from that point of view, they have an inalienable, mandate to ensure that they protect children. But what is happening now at the moment, or what has been happening over a period of time, it's not protecting these children, but it is just removing them, violating their rights continuously. Thank you.
Dzvinka, there's also an emphasis on the importance of African peace missions in addressing the conflict in Ukraine and the safe return of Ukrainian children. How can South African insights and experiences then contribute to really developing effective measures for repatriating children who are affected by armed conflict, not only just in Ukraine, but globally as well, Dzvinka?
Thanks for this question, because indeed the experience of Ukraine shows that there is no international mechanism how children that are suffering in the armed conflict can be returned. So we hope that through this painful Ukrainian case we'll be able to develop the mechanism that would be useful for children in other conflicts as well. This includes identification of children, returning, and also reintegration into their communities. So we are proposing the process that could be unified among different countries, and also can be used for different armed conflicts.
Dr. Fokala, how do you assess the role of international law and human rights frameworks in really addressing the challenges faced by Ukrainian children who are forcibly deported to Russian territory?
Most of us are witnesses of what happened between Israel and Palestine, for the decision that the ICJ, the provisional measure that the ICJ on Israel, and how it is becoming increasingly difficult even for Israel to implement any of those provisional measures. In the same spirit, the international structures that protect or that are meant to promote and sustain children's rights mechanisms, and I'm speaking now particularly about the United Nations Convention or the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, is the fact that the committee could only make recommendations, what is called on Russia, to ensure that this act is stopped with immediate effect. What I think that the committee could also do, and I'm sure that Ukraine could put a submission in front of the committee to request the committee to do that, and then it has to now go on to write to Russia to carry out some kind of investigation within those two countries, and should condemn it the moment they are able to conclude their own investigations on that point. At the moment, the mechanisms that promote or actually protect children's rights, in my opinion, they're not very strong. They don't pass binding decisions. And in the course of our presentations and submissions that we've made so far now in partnerships and to other institutions, we have strongly, in a way, put forward the fact that it might be time to really look into this restructuring, either the ICJ or the ICC, or why not building or putting together an entire new structure that would deal with children's rights issues globally. And the point that I'm making here is simple, is the fact that if you look at the crisis and the wars that are taking place across the globe, you take it from Ukraine to Russia, Israel, Palestine, the one in Burkina Faso, Mali, Togo, Sudan, as well, that is ongoing, and DRC Congo, you'll find that children are more or less the low-hanging fruits. But there is no binding mechanism that should actually pass on decisions that will hold state parties binding. And I can just remind you that this UNCRC is the most popular or the most ratified United Nations treaty. And for that reason, so there is enough ground to hold these states accountable, because most of them, except the United States, state parties to this convention.
Dzvinka, as we wrap up our conversation, can you shed light on some of the efforts and strategies that are employed by civil society organizations in Ukraine to really advocate for the rights and repatriation of these children? What support systems are in place for families who are affected by the crisis?
Ukrainian Association of South Africa works directly with the organization Voices of Children that has been supporting Ukrainian forcefully deported children since 2014, because the war in Ukraine didn't start in 2022, unfortunately already in 2014, and as early as 2015 children were deported to different parts of Russia from the occupied territories. So organization the Voices of Children is providing psychological support, but also works through different means to return return Ukrainian children back. Some of the barriers that they are facing is, first of all, to identify those children, because Russia does not provide even to International Red Cross any information about children and their whereabouts in Russia. So most of that information is coming through organizations or individuals that are inside Russia and accidentally learn about Ukrainian children that have suddenly appeared in their regions. And so far, Ukrainian children have been recorded in more than 54 regions of Russia. Some of them are 8,000 kilometers away from Ukraine. As soon as those children are identified, then their relatives can start a very difficult journey, because they obviously can't cross the border between Ukraine and Russia. They would have to go to Poland and to Belarus, to Lithuania, through other Baltic countries. So they cross 5-6 borders. On the border with Russia, they will go through the filtration process as a Ukrainian citizen. So it means that they will be interrogated and might be go through the process of forced nudity during that process to identify that they are not dangerous for Russian Federation. If they manage to get inside Russia and get to the authorities that having Ukrainian children, they would still have to somehow prove that this is a child, and very often Russian authorities do not recognize Ukrainian birth certificates or any Ukrainian documents. So those parents might go through the process of DNA testing or other tests. So this process might be difficult and might be very, very lengthy. And this is probably why there are only 500 children that have been returned out of 19,500. And now we are 2 years of the full-scale invasion. So it's very, very, very little. And as you know, children's identity changes very quickly. So if they are not allowed to speak their language and every day they are told that their parents don't want them, obviously they are going to suffer. And this is why we are calling all who knows any information about whereabouts of Ukrainian children to give it to us or directly to Voices of Children, so that we can help to get those children back.
Thank you to my esteemed guests, that's Dzvinka Kachur, as well as Dr Elvis Fokala, for really sharing their insightful perspectives on some of the challenges surrounding the unlawful deportation and transfer of Ukrainian children to Russian territory.